those costs are not only costs that the health systems or health insurers are seeing, but over about 80%, actually 79% of employees from large employers are covered by self-insured plans, meaning the companies are taking the brunt of those costs and they are then being passed on as one of the highest expenses. So, we've had we've learned great reasons as to why we need to protect our institutions such as FEMA and NOAA and others from the perspective of health, but also, thinking of the resilience of our anchor communities and thinking about the financial impacts we're seeing, where extreme weather events alone are causing billions of dollars of impact from heat and health implications. There really needs to be a greater urgency to act and to protect. And for that, I am really grateful that you are all here and hope that we can all lean in to urge action at a greater level. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Seema. Next, I'd like to introduce Michelle Roos, Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Network. Michelle, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. Hello, my name's Michelle Roos. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Network. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a small virtual staff and a nonpartisan volunteer network of over 700 former EPA staff like me. We're health and legal and scientific experts, and we are deeply concerned about what's happening to the Environmental Protection Agency, and more importantly, as has been referenced many times, to our health. Whatever your politics, we all drink water. We all breathe air. We're in this together. So what happens at the Environmental Protection Agency happens to all of us, to each and every one of us and the people we love. It's why we need to raise our voices, because health is more important than politics. Unfortunately, not everyone believes that. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin has taken a chainsaw to EPA and therefore to all of us. He is favoring corporate polluters over our health. He has announced that he'll be rolling back 31 regulations, and that's going to put 200,000 lives at risk. He's terminated billions of grants meant for low-income communities to improve their infrastructure. Remove lead pipes, install solar panels, clean up air, clean up water. And he's driven away thousands and thousands of staff. Key programs, climate, environmental justice, science offices have been completely dismantled at EPA, and even more have been gutted. This is nothing less than a systemic dismantling of EPA's ability to protect our health. And it gets worse. We're talking about the budget. The Trump administration's fiscal year 26 budget proposes a staggering 55% cut to EPA's top-line funding, which would give EPA its smallest budget, adjusted for inflation, since the Ford administration. And we will all suffer the consequences, with more asthma risk, more cancer, more premature death. These cuts come at a time when extreme weather, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, record heat are devastating all of our communities. These aren't abstract, theoretical, future problems. These are climate impacts with real health consequences right now. And at the center of all of this is a Trump administration putting politics over science, putting money over our health and safety. And it hasn't always been this way. The very first EPA administrator, William Ruckelshaus, a Nixon and later Reagan appointee, said that EPA must follow the science, follow the law, and be transparent. He knew, EPA career staff knows, that without science and the truth, EPA can't do its job. And without a robust budget, EPA can't protect us. So here's where you come in. Elected officials need to hear from you, from all of us. Our voices can make a difference between whether or not the protections set up by the Environmental Protection Agency stand or fall. So we all encourage you to contact your representatives, tell them what EPA means to you, why this is important to you, your kids, your neighbors, urge them to reject these devastating cuts, and require EPA to work for us again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Now, our final speaker is Frank Sesno, Emmy award-winning journalist and founder of Planet Forward. Frank, the floor is yours. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. And thanks to you, Kimberly, and everybody for organizing this, and to the other distinguished speakers. I'm honored to be sharing a few minutes and be in your presence and everybody else who's here. I do want to talk about some of what we've just heard in sort of a big picture way. A few years ago, I had someone who was then President Barack Obama's Office of Science and Technology Policy come to my class. And I swear I did not write this for her, but what she said was, when it comes to climate change and many of these issues, we do not have a science problem, we have a communication problem. And today we have seen at a very polarized nation, and as we've heard this evening through all these examples, a deeply, deeply challenging situation from this polarized country, from our polarized politics, and our politics that actually do not reflect the will and the opinion of the country at large. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Yale Center on Climate Communication and the 6 Americas that they have tracked through polling. It's worth a moment, and it's worth a moment of reflection. The alarmed, the concerned, and the cautious together, and I'm giving the cautious some benefit of the doubt in that they understand that climate change is real, but they're cautious as to how far they go or whether they ascribe human intent, but they basically are on board with this, represent 72% of the American public in 2024. From 2011 to 2024, the percentage of alarmed grew by 11%. The concerned shrunk by 4%. That went into the alarm. The cautious shrunk by 5%. That went into the alarm. People have seen, as Dr. Voles talked about before, and they've experienced wildfire, smoke, extreme heat, extreme weather, floods, hurricanes. They understand that something is going on. So the question for you and for us is how, in an environment such as this that we're in now, and whether you're lobbying a Democrat, a Republican, an alarmed or a concerned, how do we speak to them? Fundamentally, we must tell stories. And what does that mean? If you're going to talk about fire jumpers, have a name. How old was he or she? Where did they come from? Where did they go? What happened when they got there? You're going to talk about particulates. Which particulates? For which community? Does the child have a name? Did the child have a disease? Was it a single mom or a married couple? Did they take the kid to a doctor? Did the kid get better? We need to bring people into the human experience, because otherwise this just sounds like policy and numbers and science and data. And with all due respect to everybody here, what is going to move people, what typically does move people, is stories and people and particulars, examples. That's how we bring it to life. Last point, and then I'll stop. A few years ago, we had a farmer come and speak to us, 4th generation Maryland farmer. He never talked about climate change, but he talked about how over the generations of those in his family owning this farm, the rains had changed to the point that he needed to reberm and redrain his property, or all the topsoil was going to run off. All he wanted was to keep his farm going and pass it on to his children. It was a powerful story. He actually was an advocate for action in climate change. But that's how he spoke to his neighbors who were also farmers. So I will merely conclude by saying that there are stories we need to tell. They do not end with "they lived happily ever after." They are stories of real struggle and concern. And in this environment, as this person said some years ago, I believe actually we do have a science problem, but we especially have a communication problem. So with that, I wish everybody great good luck.
Thank you so much, Frank. Appreciate you. Now we're also joined by Quentin Scott of the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, who will tell us more about how we can take action in this moment. Quentin, thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly. I really made it a point of emphasis to make sure I joined the call tonight because we are truly at a pivotal moment in our nation's history and a pivotal moment in our personal lives. Our freedoms are facing a coordinated assault by the Trump administration. I can't help but remember to last year when Trump promised the fossil fuel oligarchs that if they raised him $1 billion, he would allow them to do whatever they like. They raised about half of that. And what do you know? Every agency dedicated to protecting communities from devastating impacts of climate change has fired staff, withheld funding, reorganized priorities, and invited the Supreme Court to strip the agencies of their own authorities. How does any of that sound like in the best interest of the people? Let's be clear. This administration isn't waiting to implement its most dangerous and expensive anti-environment, anti-science agenda in history. We've already seen the consequences of undercutting climate protections with deadly results, from dozens of children being swept away in flash floods in Texas to hundreds dying in wildfires. We don't have until November 2026 to fight back. We have to do everything in our power now to push back. We have a right to a safe climate, clean air, and clean water. We must demand our government act to protect communities through life-saving work of the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Together, these agencies, when funded and staffed appropriately, can ensure that we follow the science, protect our families from extreme weathers triggered by climate crisis, and reduce the pollution that causes climate change as quickly as possible to stave off even more damage and destruction and lives lost in the future. They must be allowed to do their work free of political interference. We are truly at a pivotal moment, and it feels uncertain. But here's what gives me hope. Yesterday, CCAN, Climate Action Campaign, and other advocacy organizations delivered 250,000 comments to the EPA, rejecting their attempt to repeal the endangerment finding. Hundreds of events have been organized across the country celebrating solar energy for Sunday this weekend. People are standing up. Right now, Congress is debating and deciding what priorities will be funded. On this call, we believe we should prioritize protecting Americans from dangerous pollution by ensuring we have scientists and public health experts doing work at DOE and EPA, keeping us safe from deadly extreme weather disasters by safeguarding research at NOAA, NASA, and the National Weather Service, and by funding preparation and recovery efforts at FEMA. As Congress considers FY26 appropriation, Congress must reject cuts to these agencies, must ensure these agencies are funded at the levels required to protect Americans and the climate, and must demand that the administration follows the law by spending congressionally appropriate funding as intended. So it's time to stand up again. Call your senators, call your House of Representatives members, and let them know that they must fully fund our agencies, implement guardrails that require the administration to spend funds as Congress intended. Right now on your screen, you'll see a QR code and a link. If you follow those, you will be able to make calls to Congress. As a former staffer, constituent calls make a huge difference. The more calls offices receive, the harder it is to ignore. So call tonight, call tomorrow, and have everyone you know call. Let's keep this up until we protect our right to a safe climate. Thank you, and I appreciate being here tonight.
Thank you so much, Quentin. I hope everyone's listening and will join us in making calls to Congress. We do have time for a few questions with our speakers. Folks can use the Q&A function to submit a question. I have a question that I would like to direct to Dr. Gupta. The Trump administration is attacking public health and science on all fronts. How do we maintain public trust in scientific expertise in the face of these attacks?
Gosh, it's such a pertinent question, especially today, when it comes to how we're revisiting the childhood vaccine schedule. It's really, I loved Frank. I mean, I loved everybody's comments. I thought Frank's point on storytelling is crucial because, unfortunately, a lot of us have lost. I mean, not anybody on this call, but a lot of us don't know what it's like to have acid rain, a reality, or maybe are not impacted by some of these climate catastrophes as much as some of us are. Or in the case of infectious diseases, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, varicella, just revisited by the current CDC. They just revised it 2 hours ago, the indications. A lot of these infectious diseases we have not had to reckon with. And so what I found to be most effective in the wake of the measles outbreak, which I think the analogies from that are relevant to this conversation and linking climate health, is exactly what Frank said. Understanding, making sure we have a common understanding of what the threat can do to our loved ones. In the case of climate, we talked about it. In the case of, for example, measles, most parents in West Texas, because I have close colleagues down there, when they were informed that measles does more than cause a rash, especially those that chose not to vaccinate their children, they were surprised that severe pneumonia and supplemental oxygen was necessary, and an ICU bed in a pediatric hospital was likely required to save their child's life. And so I think making no assumptions, telling stories, as Frank said, very persuasive. And I hate to say it, but I do think fear motivates. And in the sense, in the setting of a situation in West Texas with measles, for example, it has caused people to really actually adopt vaccination. And it's unfortunate it took that, but it's motivating. So I do think we have to be opportunistic in some ways and leverage both storytelling and the moment to reach people. But I don't know if we have another choice.
Thank you for those thoughts. We'll have time for one more question. I'm going to give this question to Dr. Voles. The question is, with funding cuts limiting preparedness resources from the federal level, what will this mean for local leaders who are preparing for or responding to extreme weather events?
So thank you. That's a great question, and I think was identified by Brenda or by Michelle about the hits to Brenda to hits to FEMA. The capacity at the local level is not there to pick up what had been covered by FEMA at the national level. What is possible for the local environment, the local communities, is to keep track of the information that is made available in advance. What this current changes have made is we have not terminated the information provision, but we've shut off the communication side. Back to the comment about communication. So finding that data would not be easy. But at most states, it was really to energize your state and local level, your state climatologist, your state emergency management teams, to talk to them about what they can do to identify the losses in information content or the gaps in information, and then see how we can reestablish those. The data are still available, but the communications paths have been severed in some places or paused. That doesn't mean that you can't still get it, but it takes more effort on the local level to reach back to those sources from NOAA or from FEMA for where the information might be available to prepare for the upcoming disasters. So it really is working with at best you can with your state level to reconnect those gaps, those connections to the federal systems at NOAA and at FEMA that are there but are not communicating per the guidance that we're receiving right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've received a question in the chat that has been answered, but I want to emphasize it for all our audience members. The question is, what actions can I take in a deeply red state to encourage environmental awareness? Calling and writing my legislators has zero effect on them. They vote along party lines. We want to urge folks in all corners of the country to call in Democratic leaders to fight for a safe climate. If you are following along in the chat, the link to the resources to make a call is right there for you, and there is a script available for when you make those calls. So I hope that you will join us. This is all the time that we have for tonight. So I want to say to our speakers, thank you so much for your expertise and for your words today and your time. To our audience, thank you so much for all that you do to stand up for the climate. That concludes our program for this evening. Thank you so much and good night.
Hey.